What if the fortress built to protect you is hiding your greatest weakness? What if, behind the gleaming shield, beneath the layers of cutting-edge technology and vigilant defenders, a far subtler threat is quietly at work, one that no missile or machine can simply intercept or destroy? In the autumn of 2025, the world watched in anticipation as NATO unveiled its crowning achievement, the Southern Bastion, a high-tech shield arcing across the skies above the embattled city of Mykolaiv. This was not merely another wall, nor a simple barrier haphazardly thrown together in haste, but a marvel of Western engineering, layer upon layer, bristling with innovation, and forged from the collective lessons and anxieties of a century's worth of conflict. The outer ring of the Bastion was a formidable sight, bristling with American Patriot PAC-3 batteries, each one the product of decades of research, billions in development funds, and the accumulated combat experience of conflicts stretching from the Gulf War to the War on Terror. Defending key nodes from high-altitude threats, these launchers had once been hailed as the gold standard for missile defense, credited with saving countless lives in previous wars by intercepting Scud missiles and similar threats. The presence of these batteries was not only a technical triumph, but a psychological one. For many on the ground, seeing the iconic launchers in position produced a sense of invincibility, a tangible sign that the best of Western industry and military science was standing guard. Beneath this outer ring, Norwegian NASAMS and German IRIS-T systems formed a seamless web, each system the result of unique national approaches to air defense. The NASAMS, famous for its modularity and adaptability, had proven itself in both homeland defense and expeditionary roles, while the IRIS-T, with its agile infrared-guided interceptors, brought a new level of precision and responsiveness. These systems hunted cruise missiles, drones, and aircraft over vast ranges, creating an invisible mesh that was said to leave no room for an enemy to slip through. The IRIS-T, for example, had been designed to defeat not only traditional threats, but also the new breed of stealthy, low-flying weapons that had emerged in the early 21st century, a response to painful lessons learned in Syria and elsewhere. Closer to the ground, French Crotale launchers and literally thousands, yes, thousands, of mobile Stinger and Starstreak manpads stood ready. The Crotale system, first developed in the Cold War but continually upgraded, had a reputation for reliability and precision. The Stinger, meanwhile, was a symbol of asymmetric power. In Afghanistan, a handful of these missiles had changed the course of battles, and now, networked and supported by real-time data, their impact was multiplied 1,000-fold. The Starstreak, with its unique laser-guided darts, was designed to defeat even the fastest and most agile aircraft. Together, these weapons formed a living wall, one that could respond not only to massed attacks, but to the smallest, most fleeting threats. All these diverse weapons, sensors, and radars were tied together by the powerful Link 16 data network, a digital nervous system that allowed instant sharing of targeting data, command orders, and sensor feeds. The Link 16 was not merely a technical marvel, it was the culmination of a Western philosophy. That information dominance, achieved through seamless integration and communication, would make even the most complex system unbreakable. This network could draw data from the latest radars, including the American MPKU-65 and Sweden's Giraffe, instantly funneling every contact back to command centers for rapid analysis and response. To NATO analysts and outside observers, the message was absolute. The Southern Bastion was an unbreakable shield. Every radar, every missile, every command center was synced into a single, unified nervous system. The promise was instant, coordinated retaliation. No threat would go unchallenged, and any attack would be met with swift, overwhelming force. The Southern Bastion was designed to be the ultimate security blanket, a dome no adversary could breach without devastating losses. It was, in many ways, the physical embodiment of the West's faith in technology as the guarantor of safety. But what if the system's very complexity was its fatal flaw? What if the intricate integration, so painstakingly constructed, was also its Achilles heel? History is replete with examples of defenses that, while formidable on paper, were ultimately undone not by brute force, but by exploitation of their weakest, least anticipated links. The Maginot Line, for example, was a marvel of French engineering in the years before the Second World War. Thought to be impenetrable, it fell not to a frontal assault, but to maneuver, deception, and the use of unanticipated routes. The Siegfried Line, the Bar-Lev Line, and the Atlantic Wall, all were breached or circumvented by adversaries who saw not the strength, but the seams. Because what happened next would shatter every assumption. A campaign was about to begin, one that would pry apart the southern bastion, layer by layer, exposing just how brittle even the most advanced digital fortresses can be when the enemy knows what to look for. The lesson, as old as warfare itself, would be driven home again. The more perfect a system appears, the more tempting it becomes as a target for those who seek to unravel it. If the world's densest, most sophisticated air defense can be unraveled, what does it mean for the billions spent on Western security, and for anyone who still believes that technology alone makes them safe? This is not merely a military question, but a societal one. Throughout history, great powers have trusted in walls, codes, and machines to keep them safe, only to discover, sometimes too late, that the enemy's ingenuity is the most dangerous weapon of all. Travel with us to the front lines at Mykolaiv, where the southern bastion first rose, and discover how its own complexity set the stage for its downfall. As we peel back the layers of this modern fortress, consider the broader implications for every nation, organization, and individual that places its faith in systems rather than adaptability. The countdown to the bastion's unraveling began not with a missile, but with a question. How do you break the unbreakable? The answer would come, as so often in the annals of military history, from the most unexpected direction. Not from a frontal assault, but from a patient, methodical campaign of observation, probing, and exploitation. How do you construct an air defense so formidable that even your adversaries deem it untouchable? The answer, according to Western doctrine, is through layers, depth, redundancy, and integration. Above the wide plains of Mykolaiv Oblast, NATO and its closest allies forged a shield they named the Southern Bastion. This was not a scattered array of launchers, but a painstakingly layered fortress, fusing the most advanced Western technology at every level. Patriot PAC-3 systems from America formed the farthest tier, reaching out to intercept ballistic missiles and high-altitude aircraft. These systems were stationed to protect critical infrastructure, command headquarters, airfields, logistics hubs, and the very nerve centers of the Ukrainian defense. The strategic logic was clear. By defending these points, the entire war effort could be sustained, and any attempt to strike deep would be met with overwhelming force. Just inside this arc, Norwegian NASAMS and German Iris-T batteries overlapped, erecting a dense screen against cruise missiles, drones, and fighter jets. The NASAMS, for example, was deployed in overlapping cells, each cell able to operate independently if cut off from the network. This approach was drawn from painful lessons in earlier campaigns, where single points of failure had led to catastrophic losses. The German Iris-T batteries, meanwhile, were distributed in a way that allowed them to reinforce each other, covering likely attack corridors and ensuring that no missile or aircraft could slip through unchallenged. Every layer reinforced the next, closing gaps with precision. The entire architecture was designed as a living ecosystem. Threats, whether hypersonic missiles or swarms of drones, could be tracked, targeted, and destroyed within seconds. This approach drew on decades of Western military thought. The concept of defense in depth, first articulated by strategists in the First World War and refined through the Cold War, was now rendered in silicon, steel, and software. At the ground level, French Crotel batteries and Polish missile units stood ready, alongside literally thousands of handheld launchers such as Stinger and Starstreak. All these weapons, sensors, and radars were bound together by Link 16, a digital nervous system. This network drew instant data from the latest radars, including the American MPKU-65 and Sweden's Giraffe, funneling every contact back to command within moments. To illustrate, imagine a scenario where a single slow-moving drone is detected by a Swedish Giraffe radar. Within seconds, its coordinates are relayed across the Link 16 network, and the nearest Stinger team is alerted. The team confirms the target visually, locks on, and launches, destroying the drone before it comes within striking distance of any vital asset. In exercises, this process took less than 10 seconds from detection to interception. The outcome was a living ecosystem. Threats could be tracked, targeted, and destroyed within moments. Every component spoke in real time. If one node fell, others filled the void. This redundancy and swift coordination convinced NATO experts and local commanders alike that breaching the southern bastion would mean catastrophic losses for any attacker. Yet, overwhelming technology brings its own dangers. When defense relies on intricate integration, unseen vulnerabilities multiply. Overconfidence, rooted in the illusion of invincibility, can blind even the most seasoned defenders. And when billions in equipment and countless lives are wagered, that blindness can become fatal. The fate of the French at Dien Bien Phu, who trusted in their fortress only to be surrounded and besieged, is a stark historical parallel. So too is the fate of the Israeli Bar-Lev line in 1973, whose engineers believed in their sand and steel barrier until it was breached by water cannons and audacious tactics. But in the autumn of 2025, Russian strategists would expose the bastion's hidden weaknesses. Their operation would shatter the myth of the invulnerable shield, showing that no matter how sophisticated the technology, it remains vulnerable to patient, intelligent adversaries. What if the very intricacy that makes you strong is the thread that unravels you? What if, in building a system so complex that only a handful of experts can master it, you create not security, but fragility? Western planners braced for a storm of missiles as the first sign of a Russian assault. Instead, the opening move was silence. For nearly a month, high above the southern bastion, A-50 warning planes and IL-20 intelligence aircraft circled just outside reach, quietly listening, mapping the invisible. These aircraft, flying at the edge of radar range, used sophisticated electronic suites to passively monitor every signal emanating from the bastion. Down below, covert teams melted into the landscape, watching, recording not only the hardware, but every routine, every shift change, every fleeting gesture of the crews that kept the fortress alive. These teams included local informants, electronic warfare specialists, and even disguised reconnaissance operators, each with a specific role in piecing together the full picture of the bastion's operation. These operatives documented each radar's flicker, every encrypted message, the subtle rhythms of command. They intercepted Link 16 transmissions, decoding the hierarchy, who gave orders, who followed, and the exact sequence by which information pulsed through the bastion. Piece by piece, the intricate web of radar coverage was charted to the last meter, exposing invisible seams and blind spots that no operator believed existed. In one documented case, a covert team observed that a key radar station always powered down for maintenance at precisely 3 o'clock every Wednesday, a routine that, once known, created a window of vulnerability. From this, a digital twin of the entire Western Integrated Air Defense Network emerged. More than a map, it was a living, breathing simulation, one that revealed not just machines, but the people and protocols binding them together. Russian analysts could now see, in chilling clarity, which nodes were linchpins, and which strands, if cut, would send tremors through the whole defensive tapestry. This approach mirrored the strategies used during the Gulf War, when coalition forces mapped and then systematically dismantled Iraqi air defenses, but updated for a new era of data and networked warfare. Before sunrise, the second phase struck with clinical brutality. At exactly 4 o'clock, waves of Kh-31 anti-radiation missiles screamed in, zeroing on the radars, blinding the bastion sentinels. Almost at once, Iskander ballistic missiles crashed down onto buried command posts, tearing at the system's neural heart. The timing was no accident. It coincided with a shift change when command and control were at their most vulnerable. But this was no ordinary bombardment. The attack came in layered, overlapping waves, a star cluster pattern that flooded the sky and the electromagnetic spectrum. Data feeds were drowned in phantom contacts, while jamming blanketed crucial frequencies. Operators faced a paralyzing dilemma: keep systems dark and stay blind, or light up and become targets for the next barrage. This tactic, known as electronic ambush, had been pioneered by Russian forces in Syria and further refined during exercises in the Caucasus. Within moments, the Bastion's seamless coordination began to fracture. Overloaded by false data and the sudden silence of key nodes, operators watched helplessly as their once formidable network crumbled. The complexity designed to provide resilience now bred confusion, amplifying every outage into a cascade of failure. An operator on the ground later described the experience as like trying to juggle 10 balls while someone keeps turning off the lights. It was a stark lesson. The most sophisticated system is only as secure as its weakest protocol. Overconfidence in complexity became the fatal flaw. Failing to anticipate a patient, intelligence-driven adversary triggered a collapse, catastrophic hardware losses, shattered morale, and the sudden evaporation of air supremacy. This echoes the lessons of the Pacific War, when the Japanese Navy's overconfidence in its code security was shattered by Allied cryptanalysts. Once the code was broken, every strength became a liability. The Southern Bastion's eyes and ears were blinded. Yet, in war, even a fortress reeling from such wounds can lash out. The true test would come as battered crews struggled to improvise, scrambling to hold the line with what remained of their fractured defenses. Improvisation became the order of the day. Technicians hot-wired backup radios, officers resorted to runners for messages, and isolated radar teams tried to make sense of the chaos with whatever tools they had left. But no amount of improvisation could fully compensate for the collapse of the network's core. But as the smoke cleared and the dust settled, a new question loomed. Could the defenders adapt quickly enough to avoid total defeat? Or would the fall of Southern Bastion become a blueprint for future battlefield collapses? The eyes of the world, and every military planner from Washington to Beijing, were fixed on the unfolding catastrophe. The fortress cracked, and panic finished the job. It is a recurring theme in military history. Once the aura of invincibility is shattered, panic spreads faster than any physical destruction. The fall of Singapore in 1942, the rout of the French army in 1940, the collapse of the Iraqi army in 2003, all were hastened by sudden psychological blows that turned cracks into chasms. With the collapse of Southern Bastion's central command links, defense dissolved into confusion. Communication lines were jammed, real-time coordination severed. Into the chaos, Russia unleashed relentless waves of deception, swarms of drones, phantom signals, and electronic ghosts. Each imitation lured desperate missile crews to reveal themselves, forcing rushed choices under impossible pressure. In one instance, a decoy drone mimicked the radar signature of a cruise missile, drawing fire from 2 separate batteries and exposing both to immediate retaliation. Every time a mobile launcher fired at a decoy, its position flashed to the enemy. Precision sensors and circling spotters tracked each launch plume, each flicker of radar. Within seconds, follow-up anti-radiation missiles screamed in. Battery after battery vanished in orange fireballs, often before their crews could even move or reload. The speed and accuracy of these counterstrikes shocked even seasoned observers who had studied similar tactics in previous conflicts. The sky now belonged to predators. 5th-generation SU-57 stealth fighters slipped through torn airspace, nearly invisible to battered radars below. These jets began their free hunts, methodically seeking out hidden Patriot batteries and command posts. From distant, safe perches, they rained down smart munitions, each one a surgical strike that paralyzed what little organized resistance remained. A single Su-57 was credited with destroying 3 key radar sites in one sortie, using glide bombs guided by satellite data. With the upper layers demolished, Russian Su-34 bombers swept in. Flying above the reach of most surviving defenses, They unleashed wave after wave of low-cost glide bombs, each one upgraded with navigation kits for ruthless precision. Infrastructure that had once supported the mighty air defense, supply depots, radar outposts, power relays, crumbled under the barrage. The use of inexpensive yet accurate munitions allowed Russian forces to sustain the assault for days without exhausting their stockpiles, a clear lesson in the value of scalable firepower. On the ground, hunter-killer helicopter teams, K-52 and Mi-28 gunships, roamed the landscape. Working in tandem with reconnaissance drones, they used bait-and-strike tactics to flush out the last defenders, man-pads teams, and mobile short-range launchers. The instant a missile fired, a waiting drone marked the spot. Helicopters swooped in for the kill, leaving no place to hide. This approach, reminiscent of the hunter-killer teams used by the United States in Vietnam, but updated with real-time drone coordination, proved devastatingly effective. All of this unfolded beneath an electronic storm. Massive jamming platforms saturated the area with noise, blacking out radios, scrambling GPS, and severing drone controls. Isolated and surrounded by static, even the best operators fought alone, stripped of situational awareness and any hope of reinforcement. The psychological impact of such isolation cannot be overstated. Many defenders reported feeling abandoned and helpless, unable to communicate even with nearby units. What began as a fortress of steel and code ended in silent panic and shattered wreckage. The loss was not only billions in hardware, but the destruction of morale, initiative, and the very ability to shape the fight. The collapse of southern Bastion was not just a defeat for its defenders, it rewrote the future of high-tech warfare itself. As the smoke cleared over Mykolaiv Oblast, analysts around the world scrambled to make sense of what had just happened. The lessons would ripple far beyond the battlefield, shaking military doctrine and strategic assumptions alike. In think tanks from London to Washington, urgent meetings were convened to reassess the viability of existing air defense strategies. Military academies began rewriting curricula to address the vulnerabilities exposed by the collapse. What does it mean when a fortress, built at the cost of billions and trusted to safeguard an entire region, collapses in less than a week? The fall of the southern bastion above Mykolaiv is not just a tactical defeat. It is a stark lesson in how overconfidence in technology and doctrine can unravel almost overnight. The parallels with the fall of the Maginot Line, the rapid collapse of the Soviet Union's air defense in Afghanistan, and the lessons of the Yom Kippur War are impossible to ignore. Air supremacy arrived first. Russian drones and strike aircraft swept the skies with near-total freedom, scanning every shift on the battlefield. Their real-time intelligence allowed commanders to strike with precision, dismantling critical systems before defenders could even respond. The defenders, so reliant on their integrated systems, found themselves blind and exposed within hours. The Western integrated air defense, once sold as nearly untouchable, was not simply outmatched. It became a warning for the future. Its complexity, long assumed to bring safety, instead exposed weaknesses that Russian forces mapped and exploited. Electronic warfare and pinpoint attacks flipped prized assets into liabilities, overturning decades of Western military thinking. The very integration that was meant to be a strength became a vector for cascading failure. The psychological shock was immediate and severe. For the defenders, the collapse of their trusted shield meant more than lost equipment. It shattered confidence, spreading fear and hesitation throughout every command level. Russian troops, in turn, surged forward, emboldened by rapid advances into areas once considered unreachable. In the days that followed, frontline positions that had held firm for months were abandoned as rumors of unstoppable airstrikes spread. The breach of the Bastion did more than threaten Mykolaiv. It tore a hole in the entire southern defense line of Ukraine. Strategic rear positions, previously thought secure, suddenly faced direct danger. Commanders scrambled to redeploy scarce resources, patching gaps while the threat grew. Logistics convoys, once safe behind the Bastion's screen, now became targets for Russian aircraft and drones, further compounding the crisis. For Western analysts and military planners, the consequences are sobering and costly. This operation forces a fundamental rethink of what integrated air defense means in the era of electronic warfare, drones, and instant battlefield data. Stacking advanced hardware is no longer enough. Adaptive adversaries now demand adaptive defenses. In the aftermath, several NATO member states launched urgent reviews of their own air defense networks, commissioning red team exercises to probe for similar vulnerabilities. The hardest lesson is relentless. Failure to adapt to these realities will mean more defeats, not just in Ukraine, but anywhere that complacency lingers. For nations staking their security on technological edge, evolution is no longer optional. It is essential for survival. Just as armored knights had to yield to gunpowder and battleships to aircraft carriers, so too must today's defenders recognize that no system is invulnerable. As the dust settles over Mykolaiv, uneasy questions remain. In the conflicts ahead, what will real security look like? And how do we guard it when yesterday's rules no longer apply? If the next adversary learns from this playbook, and history suggests they will, what steps can be taken to avoid repeating the same mistakes? The aftermath in Mykolaiv sent ripples far beyond Ukraine's borders. Military leaders and policymakers across the world began reassessing their own defenses, anxious to avoid a similar fate. In capitals from Berlin to Tokyo, the question was asked, are our own defenses truly as robust as we believe? Or are they just as vulnerable as the southern Bastion proved to be? If the world's strongest shield can be unraveled, thread by thread, how will you respond? The answer is not a simple one. It requires not just new technology, but new thinking, new training, and a willingness to question even the most sacred assumptions. The illusion of technological invincibility has been shattered. Southern Bastion, designed as an impenetrable fortress, did not fall to brute force, but to precision, patience, and the relentless exploitation of overlooked seams. Layer after layer, what seemed secure was mapped, probed, and undone by adversaries willing to learn, adapt, and outpace their defenders. The story is a modern echo of the Trojan horse. A fortress brought down from within, not by overwhelming force, but by those who understood its true nature. In the autumn of 2025, decades of doctrine and billions of dollars in hardware were rendered obsolete within days. Complexity, left unexamined or misunderstood, transformed from strength into a source of danger. The same deep integration that promised security instead opened hidden channels for disruption. The lesson is clear. Resilience comes not from complexity alone, but from adaptability and the ability to recover from surprise. This is more than a story of military failure. It is a warning. Technological sophistication alone will not save us. Every system, no matter how intricate, is only as strong as its shifting weakest point, and those weaknesses evolve as opponents innovate. To rely on yesterday's solutions is to invite tomorrow's defeat. The fate of the Southern Bastion is not just a cautionary tale for generals, but for anyone who trusts in systems without understanding their limits. Refusing to adapt, clinging to familiar assumptions, means risking a repeat of disaster, at a cost measured not just in lost machinery, but in human lives and shattered trust. The next war, the next crisis, will not pause while we rewrite our doctrines. The world will not wait for us to catch up. So ask yourself, what will you do differently, knowing that even the mightiest fortress can be unraveled by those who find its faults? Are we truly ready to challenge our own beliefs, rethink our strategies, and invest not just in technology, but in resilience and adaptability? The future, as the fall of the Southern Bastion shows, will not be kind to those who mistake complexity for invincibility. The story of the Southern Bastion is not yet over, nor is its lesson fully learned. But one truth stands above the wreckage. Real security is not built on walls alone, but on the willingness to see, to adapt, and to change, before the enemy forces us to do so.